So 21 agile concepts and topics in 21 minutes. Just what you need for your PMP or PMI-ACP exams to help you become an intermediate or practitioner from a beginner level. Let's get started. No fluff, no textbook waffles, okay? Just the core concepts you absolutely need to know, explained clearly, quickly, and in a way that actually makes sense for the exam. And this video will be sort of your rapid fire revision guide, okay? Just before the days of your PMP or PMI-ACP exams. So we'll cover everything from the Agile Manifesto and the Scrum mechanics right through to servant leadership, Kanban, lean and scaling frameworks. So grab a pen and a paper, stay focused, and let's get through all the 21 topics together, starting right now. Right, so we'll divide this entire video into 5 clusters, okay, to have sort of a framework for us to understand the concepts in a logical flow. So starting with cluster 1, the foundations. Topic 1, the Agile Manifesto and its 4 core values. So the Agile Manifesto of 2001 established 4 core values as the cornerstone of Agile framework. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. Now, here is the critical point for your exam, okay? Note that the word is over, okay? Not instead of. So we still need documentation, contracts, and plans in Agile projects. However, we prioritize the left side over the right side. So PMI will absolutely test this distinction in the exams, okay? Next, topic number 2, the 12 Agile Principles. So the 12 Agile Principles brings the 4 values to life. Now the exam won't ask you to list all the 12, okay? However, it will test whether you understand the intent behind each one of them. So the key ones to lock in are deliver working solutions frequently, welcome changing requirements even late in the development, build around motivated and empowered individuals, and maintain a sustainable pace of work. And critically for the exam, please keep in mind that the best solutions emerge from self-organizing teams and not from top-down management, right? And teams regularly reflect and adjust their behavior as a self-feedback loop. That's continuous improvement integrated right into the manifesto. Topic number 3, Agile versus predictive versus hybrid. When to use what? So this is the number 1 decision-making topic for your PMP or PMI-ACP exams. The word agile or waterfall will rarely appear in the exam question itself, okay? So you have to infer the right approach from the scenario. So thumb rule is, if it is stable, well-defined, go with predictive. If it is evolving requirements with very frequent customer feedback, go with agile. And if it is a project that has both fixed and flexible elements to it, that's hybrid. So for example, a hardware delivery on a fixed regulatory timeline, but the software features updated iteratively based on user feedback, that's classic hybrid, right? So please read the scenario carefully, follow the nature of the requirements, and the right answer will be quite evident. Topic number 4, Agile mindset versus Agile methodology. So doing Agile and being Agile are 2 completely different things, okay? So doing Agile means you have the ceremonies, i.e. the stand-ups, sprint boards, retrospective, etc. However, being Agile means you have embraced the thinking of, let's say, welcoming change, empowering your team, focusing on outcomes over outputs, etc., etc. So that's a mindset shift, right? So I have seen teams running every single Scrum ceremony by the book. However, the moment a stakeholder requests a change, the initial response is, oh, that was not a part of the sprint, or that was not in the sprint plan. Now that's waterfall thinking dressed in agile clothing, okay? So the PMP or the PMI-ACP exam especially tests this. So when in doubt, the answer in line with empowerment and flexibility and adaptability will almost always beat rigid process adherence when it comes to agile frameworks or when it comes to the scenario as presented to you as part of the question in the exam. Moving on to cluster 2, Scrum. So the dominant framework in both PMP and PMI-ACP exams. Topic number 5, the Scrum framework. So the Scrum is an agile framework for delivering complex work in short, focused cycles called sprints, okay? So it has three core components: roles, ceremonies, and artifacts. Everything in Scrum exists to support one goal, okay? And the goal is to deliver value to the customer quickly and iteratively whilst continuously improving on how the team works. Now for the exam, understand Scrum as an empirical framework, okay? So it's built on three pillars, which are transparency, inspection, and adaptation. So if a question describes a team reviewing progress and adjusting their approach based on the feedback, that's Scrum in action. Moving on, topic number 6, Scrum roles. So the three roles of product owner, Scrum Master, and development team are the key ones which you need to know if you are appearing for the PMP or the PMI-ACP exam. So the product owner owns the what, okay? So they manage the product backlog and prioritize work based on business value. The Scrum Master, on the other hand, owns the how, okay? So they are the servant leader, removing impediments and protecting the team, sort of a project manager per se. And the development team owns the doing, okay? And they are self-organizing and collectively responsible for delivery. So some very common traps about which you need to be aware for the PMP or the PMI-ACP exam would be that Scrum Masters typically do not manage the team, okay? And also the product owners typically do not write code. So the boundaries stay very, very clear between these three roles. And you as an exam aspirant need to be aware of that. Next, topic 7, Scrum ceremonies. 5 ceremonies, okay? Each has a very specific purpose. First, sprint planning. Here the team decides what to deliver and how. Secondly, daily Scrum. So it's a 15-minute daily quick catch-up on progress and blockers, not a status report for management. Number 3, sprint review. Here the team demonstrates working output to stakeholders and collects the feedback accordingly. Number 4, sprint retrospective. Here the team reflects on how they worked and identifies improvements. And number 5, backlog refinement. It's an ongoing session to review and prepare upcoming backlog items for the future sprints. So I strongly suggest that you know what each of these ceremony produces and who attends each of these ceremonies. So questions often test the purpose and the intent of a ceremony, okay? Not just the definition. Moving on to topic number 8, Scrum artifacts. Typically, the Scrum artifacts are product backlog, sprint backlog, and the increments, 3 artifacts. So each serves a distinct function. So the product backlog is the master list of all the work that needs to be done, okay? And it's owned and prioritized by the product owner. The sprint backlog is the subset of the backlog items the team commits to deliver in the current sprint, and it's owned by the development team. Finally, the increment is the working, usable output delivered at the end of each sprint, and it must meet something called as definition of done. So Scrum artifacts create transparency. So if a question asks how to make work visible or how to report work in a way you can track progress in a Scrum team, think about these 3 artifacts within a Scrum team, okay? Next, topic number 9, sprints and time boxing. So a sprint is a fixed length iteration, typically 1 to 4 weeks, during which the team delivers a potentially shippable product increment. The length is agreed upfront and it does not change mid-sprint, okay? So time boxing is the key concept which drives the entire sprint planning. So it's not a deadline, however, it's a boundary that creates focus, predictability, and rhythm. So candidates often confuse time boxing with rigid deadlines, okay? So if a question asks what the team should do when they cannot complete all the sprint items, the answer is never to extend the sprint, okay? So the scope is adjusted to deliver the minimum viable product within the time box, okay? So it's very little scope to play with the time box overall. Make sense? Moving on to topic number 10, definition of done versus definition of ready. 2 definitions, both are quite often tested and of course quite often confused as well. So definition of done, it's a shared agreement on what complete means for any increment or backlog item, okay? So if the work which is delivered doesn't meet the definition of done, it's not done. As simple as that. So the definition of done ensures quality and transparency across the team, and it also ensures a common understanding across the team. Now, definition of ready is a checklist confirming that a backlog item is sufficiently understood and refined before the team pulls it into a sprint, okay? So definition of done applies at the output. However, definition of ready applies at the input. So for example, if a question involves a quality standard or sprint acceptance criteria, think of definition of done, because it is the end of the sprint where these kind of acceptance criteria and quality checks are done to accept the product, right? It's not definition of ready. Right, so let's move on to cluster number 3, execution mechanics. So this is where agile theory meets the day-to-day delivery, and these 5 topics are heavily tested in both the exams. Topic number 11, user stories and acceptance criteria. So a user story captures a requirement from the end user's perspective, okay? The format is simple. As a user, I want to, there is a feature so that there is a benefit, right? So it keeps the focus on value and not technical specification. So good user stories follow the INVEST or INVEST criteria, which means independent, negotiable, valuable, estimable, small, and testable, okay? Acceptance criteria define the conditions a story must meet to be considered complete. Think of them as the measurable boundaries of the user story. So if a question involves unclear requirements or scope disagreements, user stories and acceptance criteria are almost always part of the right answer. All right. Topic number 12, story points and velocity. So story points are a relative estimation unit used by agile teams to measure the effort, complexity, and uncertainty of backlog items. So they are not in hours, they are not in days, okay? It is based on relative sizing only. So for example, teams typically use planning poker to estimate story points. And planning poker is a collaborative technique that surfaces different perspectives and drives consensus, okay? You can Google the term and study more about it. Velocity, on the other hand, is the average number of story points a team completes per sprint, measured over several sprints. So it helps the team forecast how much work they can realistically deliver. So velocity is a planning tool, okay? It's not a performance metric. So you should never use it to compare team performances. Topic number 13, backlog refinement. So backlog refinement, also known as backlog grooming session, is the ongoing process of reviewing, clarifying, prioritizing, and estimating backlog items so that they are ready for the upcoming sprints. So this is not a one-off activity, okay? It happens continuously throughout the project. So the product owner leads it with the active participation from the development team. Now, a common misunderstanding could be that candidates treating backlog refinement as optional or informal, okay? But unfortunately, PMI thinks backlog refinement as something which is structured, mandatory, and is a recurring activity essential to sprint readiness, okay? So if a question describes a team going into sprint planning unprepared or with unclear priorities, poor backlog refinement is almost always the root cause. Next, topic number 14, burn down charts and burn up charts. 2 visual tracking tools, both tested and both require you to interpret them in the right manner to answer a scenario-based question. So a burn down chart tracks remaining work over time within a sprint or a release. The line should trend downward towards 0 by the end of the sprint, right? So along that trajectory, if it flattens or if it rises, the team is behind or the scope has increased, any one of those scenarios. A burn up chart, on the other hand, tracks completed work over time. So it's the inverse of burn down chart. It also shows the total scope line, which makes scope changes immediately visible. So burn up charts are better for tracking scope changes than burn down charts, okay? So if a question involves clarity or visibility around scope creep or possible scope addition, the burn up chart needs to be analyzed, not the burn down chart. Topic number 15, continuous integration and continuous delivery. So continuous integration or CI means developers merge their code changes into a shared repository frequently and often multiple times a day. Each merge triggers automated testing, catching defects, etc. quite early on. However, continuous delivery or CD means that the software is always in a releasable state. So every iteration produces something that could be deployed to the customer immediately if needed. So together, CI and CD reduces integration risk, accelerates feedback loops, and supports the Agile principle of delivering working solutions frequently. So this topic of CD and CI appears increasingly in the PMP and PMI-ACP exams under business agility and technical domains. So if a question involves reducing defects or accelerating delivery cycles, generally CI or CD is likely the correct answer. Right, so up next is cluster 4, Agile leadership and team dynamics. 3 topics, and this is where the core Agile mindset comes into play. Topic number 16, servant leadership. So servant leadership is the single most tested leadership style in Agile, in PMP and PMI-ACP questions, okay? And it is frequently misunderstood. A servant leader does not direct or control, okay? They enable their team. Their job is to remove the impediments which are blocking the team, okay? Their job is to facilitate collaboration, shield the team from organizational noise, and create conditions where people can do their work in the best possible manner. So if a question describes a Scrum Master or Agile Project Manager telling the team what to do or how to do it, that is generally the incorrect answer choice. The right answer always prioritizes enabling something over directing something. Make sense? Topic number 17, self-organizing and self-managing teams. So in Agile, the team collectively decides how to accomplish the work, who does what, how problems are solved, and how tasks are allocated. No manager assigns the tasks, okay? No top-down instructions also come on how a thing should be done. So the product owner owns the what, as we have discussed, which are the priorities. The team owns the how, which is the execution. And that boundary is quite critical for the exam. Self-organizing does not mean chaotic or unstructured, okay? It means that the team has the autonomy, capability, and trust to make decisions within a defined set of boundaries and goal. So in your exam, if a question involves a team empowerment or decision-making authority, the answer will always favor the team autonomy over management control, right? Next, topic number 18, retrospectives and continuous improvement. The sprint retrospective is the Agile team's dedicated space for continuous improvement and self-reflection. And it is one of the most frequently tested ceremonies in both PMP and PMI-ACP exams. It happens at the end of every sprint. The team reflects on 3 things: what went well, what didn't, and what specific improvements will be made in the next sprint. Now remember that retrospectives are about team process improvements, okay? Not product feedback per se. Because product feedback happens in the sprint review, not in sprint retrospective. So keep these 2 ceremonies clearly separated in your mind. So if a question asks what a team should do after a difficult sprint, retrospective is almost always the right answer because it directs towards self-reflection. So moving on to cluster 5, the final stretch. 3 very critical topics covering Kanban, Lean, and scaling frameworks within Agile. Topic number 19, Kanban, which is important to visualize work, limit the work in progress, and manage the flow. So Kanban is essentially a flow-based Agile framework built around 3 core principles. Visualize your work, limit work in progress, and manage the flow continuously. Now, unlike Scrum, Kanban has no sprints, okay, or no fixed iterations, and of course, no prescribed roles as well. Work items flow through columns on a Kanban board, typically from the column of to do to the column of in progress, and finally to the column of done. And the team pulls new work only when the capacity allows for it. So the key exam concept which you need to know is WIP limits, or work in progress limits, which is restricting how many items can be in progress simultaneously. So this prevents bottlenecks and keeps the team focused. An exam tip would be, if a question describes a team overwhelmed with too many parallel tasks, Kanban and work in progress limits are likely the right answer choices, okay? Next, topic number 20, Lean principles. Eliminate waste, maximize value. So Lean originated in manufacturing, okay? Especially in Toyota, and its core philosophy is very simple. Deliver maximum value to the customer by systematically eliminating waste from the process. So Lean, as per philosophy, identifies 8 types of waste as you see on the screen. Now in Agile context, waste means anything that doesn't directly contribute to the customer value. So a couple of key concepts around the Lean principle would be value stream mapping, which is to visualize the entire delivery process to identify waste. It's also called VSM. and the concept of flow, which is ensuring work moves smoothly without bottlenecks or delays. So Lean as a philosophy underpins much of the Agile Manifesto thinking. So if a question involves process efficiency or waste reduction around the scenario, think about Lean principles. Make sense? And finally, topic number 21, scaling Agile via SAFE and LESS. So when Agile needs to work across multiple teams simultaneously, that's when scaling frameworks come into place. The two most commonly tested in the PMP exam and the PMI-ACP exam are SAFE, SAFE, and LESS, which is LESS. So SAFE, which means the Scaled Agile Framework, organizes multiple Agile teams into Agile release trains aligned to a program increment, typically 8 to 12 weeks long. It introduces additional roles like release train engineer and product management at scale. Now LESS, which is large scale Scrum, takes a simpler approach, applying standard Scrum principles across multiple teams with minimal additional roles or processes. Now an exam tip from my side would be, for PMI-ACP, you need to know especially the distinction between the two. So SAFE is more structured and prescriptive, LESS is leaner and closer to pure Scrum or more towards adaptability and flexibility, right? So if this video added value to your exam preparation, please press the like button and subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you again in the next one.